Okay, I've got this muddied area. I probably have this tune is probably as good as I'm going to get it. All right, so if I'm looking in this area here, it's not as muddy. And you know, you really need to consider just how much effort you want to put into something, because will the viewers of your animations, will they sit here and take a single frame and analyze it and scrutinize it forever? No. But will it have an impact on your overall scene? Yes. Does that contribute to the presentation, to the story that you're trying to tell? Well, yeah, it makes a contribution because it's a fairly large area. But this area, this area is going to animate by. So it's not like you're trying to it's not like you're trying to sell $100,000 still. All right, and somebody's going to look at that and say, ah, that's really marring the whole thing up. Well, in an animation, that all goes by, but it does contribute to the storyline, the story of your animation. All right, so when you get to a point where you say, look, you know, does it detract from my storyline, my animation storyline? And you say, well, not really. Would that detract from a still? Absolutely. Will it detract from an animation? Man, you know, it'll hurt it a little bit, but so you got to make compromises. And this is true with all forms of art. You have to make compromises. There's a point at which the improvement doesn't really get you much more, but you still want to try. But you got to ask yourself, how far do I need to go for the purposes of this piece of art? And animation is art. So I'm going to decide that's the best I can do, at least for now. Now I might come up with a whole different um, scenario, or I might animate this thing and say, oh man, I really have to fix this, or I may animate this thing out full frame, you know, full resolution. I say, hey, what was I worried about? You don't really know until you get the full frame and you get the full effect and you have the full animation. Let's apply our modifications to all the keyframes. Now, this is a this is an important capability of the Mandelbulb 3D. And I have to give people a lot of respect for having thought this through um, and understanding that keyframing can be a difficult thing to do. And understanding, I really do think that the people that were involved with the Mandelbulb 3D had, what shall we say, had their act together. I really do believe that. Okay? Now, I'm sure that there was, I believe that there was one primary developer by the name of Jesse, or I don't know his last name, but he was in some foreign country. I'm not exactly sure where. But there were a number of people, from my understanding, that were assisting with the development of the Mandelbulb 3D. They were coding it up, and then they would submit their changes, and those would be adopted into the final. It was a contribution of a variety of people, but I do believe that the Mandelbulb 3D software was actually well designed. It's unfortunate, though, that the lead developer had at one point resigned and basically said, look, I don't have the time to do this anymore. There were some other people that tried to pick up the project and tried to move it forward, but for various sundry reasons, they just weren't able to. The software is now under the management of an individual who understands fractal software and is the author of another wonderful piece of software called J Wildfire. And so he's managing the 3D, the Mandelbulb 3D software, but we're not really seeing a whole lot of updates and changes, which is not too bad because, like I said a few minutes ago, the software is well designed. So the developer or developers of the Mandelbulb 3D software understood that you are going to create an animation and you're going to say, oops, and you want to make a modification, but you're going to need to modify all of the keyframes, especially with lighting. That has an impact on all keyframes. So here's how you do it. So I made modifications down here in the lighting panel for light source number 1. I changed my ambient shadowing and I changed my dynamic fog. Now let's apply that to all the keyframes. So here we go. So we're going to open this window here. I'm going to get it right here. All right. Animation processing. And I opened this from the processing tab. I'm sorry, button from the animation maker. That's the only way to open it. Now, we're not going to talk about everything. This is all part of rendering conversation, which we'll probably get to, I don't know, in another 100 sessions the way it's going. I don't know. But we're going to get to all of this. The key thing about this is that what you want to do is check all the light and color settings. Check that on. Actual hard shadow settings. We didn't change any hard shadow settings. We changed ambient shadowing, but we didn't change hard. Actual ambient shadow par or parameter. Yeah, we changed ambient shadow. We'll check that on. Actual reflection settings. We didn't change any reflections. Actual depth of field, we didn't change that. Actual coloring tab options, we didn't change that. Actual stereo parameters, didn't change that. Actual camera settings, we didn't change the camera. All right. So I've got 2 of these things checked on that I did impact. Now, upon these buttons, put the values to all keyframes, which is what I want to do. To this keyframe and the following, this keyframe meaning the one that's currently selected, and all the following. I don't want to do that. To this keyframe and all before, this keyframe and all before. I don't want to do that because otherwise this keyframe wouldn't get the benefit of my changes. Only the actual keyframe, this one right here. What I want to do is I want to put the values to all keyframes, both before and after, so that all my keyframes benefit from the work that I did to improve this scenario. So I'm with these 2 checked on, all right, which pertain to the settings that I actually modified. I didn't modify anything relevant to this section. So I'm going to punch this. So now all of my ambient shadow and dynamic fog were applied across all the keyframes. I don't see anything. What's interesting is that these keyframes don't update where you can see or kind of get a clue as to their modifications. Now I'm going to exit this processings window. Now I actually made a modification to the animation, so I want to very quickly save this, and I'm going to say, let's see, all right, so what am I? I am in session 10, where are we? 109? 110. All right, my animation, okay, shadowing all keyframe, KF, okay? Oh, shadowing, change applied to all KF. Got it. Save. Good. Good. Now let's just kind of prove whether or not we actually did anything here. I'm going to pull this keyframe back down here, and let's watch to see whether or not this shadowing is approximately what we had modified it to. Let's do that. Pull that down, recalculate. Okay. Okay, good, good, very good. Very good. Yeah, okay, all right. There's an improvement there. This area of my scene is less muddy. Less muddy. All right. All right, so I've made a modification to ambient shadows and dynamic fog. And then I use the processings panel to apply that change to all the keyframes. Now that saves me from going back to each keyframe and making the modification and then pushing the keyframe back up. I certainly do it that way, but that shortcutted modifying across all my scenes. But I'm still very happy that I haven't moved so far in the number of keyframes, even though I've got that little feature to apply a change to all keyframes. There's other issues at stake, such as the movement, all right, the animation events, the lighting, which we handled, and then of course coloring. Both lighting and coloring can be applied. Changes to lighting and coloring can be applied with the processings window. All right, animation events can't be applied with this window, and motion can't be applied with that window. Only lighting and coloring, and topic for another time, quality related settings across all keyframes. Okay, so we're going to get back to that at some other point. All right, so that's enough for this session. Maybe it's time to heat up the coffee, or maybe a fresh pot. That's some pretty intense stuff here in the last 5 or 6 sessions. So why don't we end now, and I'll see you in the next session, and we will continue the Mandelbulb3D Tutorial Series within the context of developing an animation. All right, so I'll see you there.